Hey folks, how are you?
Good. Happy
Good.
Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
Happy
Jonathan,
Friday.
Happy Friday. Jonathan, you're on mute, by the way. Just FYI. Hey, Mike.
Mike's on mute.
What up, Jonathan? What up, Jonathan? Yeah, I was on mute.
Hello,
I
everybody.
said,
Sorry about that.
yeah. Jonathan, you on mute now again.
No, I'm not on mute now.
No, he's good. He's good.
No, I'm messing.
All right, how's it going, everyone?
It's going great.
Right.
Good, thank you.
Good.
How you doing?
Good, doing great.
I'd love a timely group. You guys are just filing in perfect. This is great.
And on a Friday, no less.
I know, it's impressive.
We're on
Must be lunchtime somewhere.
Well, wait, when you're in the phone business, you gotta be on time.
I like that. I like
Yep.
that.
Brad, is Steve coming with us today too? Or is he gonna be out? I don't know.
I'm not too sure.
I
I'm not
don't
sure.
see any Steves on yet. Here he is now. There you go. Letting
Awesome.
him in, letting him in.
There, Steve, Christy, Crystal, Patrick. Joe, we're missing Joe, I think. I think that's it too, isn't it, Joe?
Joe and Greta.
Hey, Steve, it puts it on mute by default. In,
In a Zoom meeting.
in Zoom, your Zoom's muted, Steve. Yeah, you gotta hit. There you go.
Say hi, everyone.
There you go.
There you go. Hello.
Hi.
What's up, Tim? Hi, everyone. Hi, Crystal.
Hi,
Hello.
Patrick. We got everybody on here.
I think we're good.
So are we good to get going?
Yes, sir.
Are we
Okay, well,
waiting for anyone on our side? Do we have Scott and
Is Joe coming?
Sam? And
Hold on.
I
Here's
just
Scott.
hung up from Scott. He was gonna be dialing in any second.
Here's Scott and here's Joe coming in now.
Thanks, Tim.
And I see Mike Tyndall too.
Then we've got Sam. Obviously, he's cameras on.
Perfect. Well, I appreciate everybody joining. Scott and I were out in San Jose about 3 or 4 weeks ago and had an opportunity to meet with you at a lead show. And we had a discussion over lunch about having a webinar for you, or kind of a bi-directional webinar. I thought was we could walk you through the best practices as we see them for ideal customer profile, and then signing up an account, setting up a campaign, getting the campaign registered, and the right type of campaign and the right kind of traffic, so that you have a higher probability of success, both in getting your campaign approved, but also in having the right kind of traffic on your network. And then at the same time, we thought, well, it would be a great opportunity if we do this, we could kind of do a deep dive for you and talk about what are the best practices, but then we'd also then like to get some feedback from you on what you would like to see in our product going forward. And so we've got Sam and Michael Tyndall on, as well as Brian, for you to provide some feedback to us over what kind of changes would you like to see, or what would you like to see on us on our roadmap going forward for product development. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Brian Ford and let him kind of walk you through best practices.
Thanks, Mike.
And you might be on mute, Brian.
I think by might you mean was. Yeah, so we're gonna pull up some slides here that we have that we typically go through, and I know, Mike, you had mentioned, previously there, if we wanted to go over the kind of customer profile, a customer type that we were looking for. I didn't know if Scott wanted to talk to that before we jumped into some of the regulatory, some of the processes, or not. Either way works for me, but if this is a good launching point, then I think we're good.
Why don't you go ahead and launch, and then if Scott can kind of interject along the way.
Yeah, so if you want to go to the first slide there, Tim.
Sure.
There we go. So what we're seeing across the board quite a bit is that we're seeing a lot of campaigns that are getting rejected when they're being submitted to the DCAs. And to take a step back and kind of understand how this all works, it's good to understand that there's the difference between a brand and a campaign, and who's responsible for each one of those in regard to being registered. So the campaign registry, we always like to say, think of the DMV. They're the ones that are going to verify your brand. They're going to look it up and say, hey, this is a legitimate business. We're going to kind of score them based off of what we can find through some touch points out there. And we're going to say, okay, they are a brand. Well, once that brand's been created, then a campaign has to be created. The campaign has to be vetted and cleared by the direct connect aggregator, right? The upstreams that have those direct connections with mobile operators. So they're the ones that are really in charge of the messaging that goes across their network. And so when we look at something like this slide here, these declines, These are coming from the DCA. They're kind of policing the what's entering the mobile networks. And there's a lot of reasons why they are declining the campaigns. A lot of them are things for like data mismatch. You can see right here, like the phone number doesn't match the opt-in, no content on the website. They can't verify anything. They go through a pretty deep process when they're vetting a campaign. And we go through this because it really explains and outlines what you need to be aware of when building the campaigns, or your customers are building campaigns, and to not get those rejections. They're going to go in and they're going to call the phone numbers on the websites that you provide. They're going to look at the emails, right? They're going to look at your private policy and terms of services to make sure you're not sharing data that you're getting through mobile mediums. So I think we go to the next slide.
So
here.
are those actually vetted individually by people looking that over, or is there
Absolutely.
like a? Oh, okay. So each
Yeah,
one
there's
is
a
okay.
manual vetting process by an individual that goes into each one,
Oh,
and we'll show you the examples of what you fill out during the campaign creation process. And they are looking at this exact data, and they're going to go and look at each detail you're putting in there to make sure it all matches. And we'll
think
see
it's
some of
important
those
to
slides a
note
little bit later. Yeah.
Yeah, and this is going to become industry standard. So it doesn't
Okay.
matter who you're using to, register your campaigns and send your traffic through. Hopefully it's always Cameo at the top of that list, but this is the new norm. All of this is going to be manually vetted. And there's a vetting fee that is associated with these. I think it's a pass through. I think it's like $15 per campaign. So when you submit them, right, it's important, like Brian's saying, to make sure everything has been thought through very carefully. The brand matches the URLs, the final URL that the mobile subscriber is going to land on. And it's also extremely important too that as part of this registration process, you're going to provide a message sample, right? And that message sample literally has to be the final version. So, when a lot of what we've been finding recently is people who are creating the campaigns and putting in a message sample, it's a draft. Yeah, we're going to say something like this, and it may be, may have to some whatever domain or some website, and then they submit the campaign that way. But then when it happens is when they actually finalize their content, the URLs change, the numbers different, right? The the header shows a different brand, like all of that's changed. And so then what happens is it goes through and then it gets flagged by the carriers for basically going outside of the approved use case, and that's a pretty serious deal. So that's why it's important, I think, for the people who are writing content in the organization, whether it be yours, your customers, whoever's doing that, they need to clearly understand this process, and that the message sample you're providing is the final sample. There's not going to be rare, like maybe a minimal deviation of what actually is going to be sent out onto the network. Those have to be solid and clear.
Scott, Jonathan here. How do they distinguish between campaign text and manual text? I mean, with such a medium like texting, you're opening a line of communication. Obviously, we have scripted campaigns that maybe kick these things off. But how do they distinguish between, because maybe my opening is this, but then it, once the person responds, oftentimes, then that
yeah, and I
goes
think
into a
that's the
direction.
key, right? This is in the first outbound message, right? If it's perceived as, depending on what category or class that you've registered the traffic, and Brian might have clarity on that. If it's like mixed marketing, or let's say this is, affiliate marketing, or it's A2P, like it's just promotional marketing. We send out this text and then someone responds. And then at that point, now you have an employee or a human being in a two-way conversation, right, with that mobile subscriber.
Yeah.
I don't think that applies. So, I mean, as long as the carriers know that that's going to happen, I think this really applies to that initial outbound text message that the customer has opted in to receive.
Right. That and that is really kind of that low mix, that low volume mixed campaign type that you generally are going to see. The other ones that are, very conversational are going to fall under the category of P2P. Obviously, anything going from a UI platform technically is considered A2P to the mobile networks, even if someone's putting in, they're typing it themselves, because those P2P binds are separate. They have to be separately provisioned, and you have to get approval from, to have P2P campaigns. We don't do a lot of the P2P stuff. It's just a lot more of a drawn out process. So we typically, would suggest a low volume mix on something like that, where, yeah, how do you distinguish between, the initial message and some conversational text going back and forth? And that's the appropriate campaign type, would be that low volume mix. And if it's really true P2P, then that's kind of a whole separate avenue that exists, because that travels a completely different bind and follows a bunch of different rules upstream. So, so yeah, it's for all intents and purposes, it's pretty much all A2P that goes through on these. So. Those are the designated binds that everything goes over. So, any more questions there or thoughts?
And I think I'd add that you can have different campaigns, you can
100%.
could be, yeah, I mean, you could have you want to do a promotional campaign, for the holidays for one of your customers. I'm just using it as an example. So that can get registered, and that'll have a different scoring and different throughput. And that one, you're going to provide a sample use, a message of, hey, it's the holidays, thank you for being a loyal customer. Use this, coupon code when you log into whatever, brand, xyz.com. And then you can be running a separate campaign that is kind of like, account alerts and notifications. Hey, thank you for logging in and making a payment. This is your code, whatever, right? So you can have different campaigns going at different times. And it's just how whatever type of campaign use case you're submitting to the registry, right? That's what has to be aligned with, the information you're providing. If it's outbound promotional, like a blast or a broadcast, then, they want to know what URLs you're using. If you're saying, hey, call us at 855-855-1212, they're going to make sure that number is valid. And that they'll call it, and if that number, whoever answers, whatever, let's say it's an answering service or a recorded text or voice, has to match the brand that was actually submitted in the campaign registration. So they're doing that deep dive into a lot of this stuff now.
So, well, I guess we'll move on to the next slide here. So, this, who's responsible for compliance, and that's why we have these, these webinars. We reach out to customers, because ultimately, we all play a role in compliance, but it ultimately falls on the creators of the content, right? Like I said, we can go back to that real quick, Tim, if you want to just hear, like,
Sure.
So, the FCC obviously governs a lot of the stuff for this, but it says, hey, know your acceptable use policies, know the rules of the road. We always like to add in, the carrier code of conducts, TCPA, CTIA guidelines. Like, if you're working in the messaging space, you really have kind of a responsibility to go and get familiar with what some of these things are. And so for compliance, and I will push on this slide, one thing that we always like to bring up is, typically what we see is we'll work with companies that will sign up, we'll go through everything, and then they almost do this handoff to their content creators that send out the messages. And there's a little bit of a disconnect, or a little bit of that telephone game where stuff gets, changed a little bit from one group to the other. And training your content creators that are working with the brands that you're working with really have to know this stuff inside and out. So I always like to add in who's responsible for compliance. I always like to add in the content creators behind these campaigns.
So for Ricochet, do you guys create the content for your customers, or do they have access to your platform to, basically upload their own content and run their own campaign traffic?
They create their own
Okay.
custom. Mhm.
So this is that part that means, so all the stuff that we're doing here, right, has to be transferred to your customers. Your customers need to know the rules. They need to know, all the stuff that we're going through, right? So they're like, I could vision you guys having a similar webinar with your customers
Yes.
about the same processes, right? And I think that's where most of like Ryan showed on, the campaigns that are being submitted and rejected. A lot of, the stuff that we're seeing also, we had one customer who submitted a campaign. It was approved, manually vetted and approved. And then a week later, we got a complaint from T-Mobile and Verizon, and I'm saying this is not the content that was approved. They looked it up. That's what the campaign registry is. It's a traceback. And so they knew who exactly what that brand was. And it's like, and come to find out, somebody, our customer's customer, someone on their content staff uploaded the message traffic for a completely different campaign. Human error. They had no idea. And that's the role. That's the big thing here, is making sure like all of this gets transferred to your customers, and that it gets down staff into their organization. So the people who are writing, like Brian said, writing the content, they're the ones that really need to clearly understand this, because they're the ones that typically are getting everybody in trouble.
Right.
So,
Yeah. So this is just the Kamia portal walkthrough on how this is created. So obviously, are you guys using the UI? Or are you guys using the API?
API.
So this is just what it looks like on the user side. We can go through it, but this kind of gives a further explanation of what we're talking about on the differences between what is a brand and what is a campaign. The brand precedes the campaign at all times. It gets vetted by the campaign registry. In our portal, you're going to go in, you register your brand. You can go to the next slide, Tim. And you're going to want to make sure that you're filling out all the required details. They've been denoted with that red asterisk mark that's in there, right? So you're going to want to make sure that all this stuff is filled out for the brand. Don't get that confused with, representing a brand, right? That's what they don't want to see. They don't want to see, Ricochet as the brand trying to create campaigns for all of their customers,
Right.
and making the customer like a campaign within itself, right? We go back and like to use the word perceived sender a lot. So who is the perceived sender? So are you, if you're getting a text message from Domino's Pizza, you better have opted into Domino's Pizza, right? And it's not a third party, like, that's another big change, like no third party and no affiliate traffic is allowed anymore, right? That's not even an option for messaging anymore. So but we want to make sure we go through, and this is the one that's going to go over to the campaign registry. They're going to check the EIN against the legal company name. They're going to check it against the registered address for when that EIN was requested from, the IRS. And so they go and have a few other touch points. You're going to get your score based off of what they find. But that's the portion of getting your brand registered. And they're saying, okay, you're real. You can now make campaigns. So we can go to the next slide here. This is where you're going to basically pick the kind of vertical or use case you're going for. I think you can see right there, there's that low volume mixed one right there at the bottom of the slide there. You can kind of see right there. That's that one that you would look for if you're kind of trying to do multiple touch points and try to throw some of that conversational stuff back into it, right? The campaign registry allows you to have up to 5 example messages, and it actually kind of matches up with the amount of use cases within that low volume section as well. You can select up to 5 different use cases inside that. But like Scott, to speak to what Scott was saying, if you do have some bigger campaigns, that low volume does get you a lower throughput. So if you have some of those bigger campaigns you want to get through, you're going to want to choose the appropriate campaign type to get the higher throughputs.
A couple slides ago, Brian, you'd mentioned, right, where you register your brand, they do the FEIN, they just do a background check on you. So, and like Brian says, you get an initial score, and that score really is going to drive what your throughput's going to be. I think that's still fair, Brian.
Right, and if you want, you can get the brand vetted.
Yeah,
you can go through that. That's, I think it's a $40 cost to vet the brand. If you're still not happy, the only recourse after that is doing a special business review upstream, which they get pretty pricey. So, I mean, there is a next step if you want to try to get that higher throughput, but I'd always recommend the vetting first before spending some of the money that they want. So, This is just going to tell you which carriers everything is going to be going for. Like right here, it tells you what the throughput is for AT&T. Typically, there's a difference between throughputs between AT&T. You guys are probably familiar with this, and like T-Mobile, right? So T-Mobile is going to be based off of a daily brand cap, and your AT&T is going to be done based on a text per minute. So this kind of gives you some of that information. We can go to the next slide there. And again, a lot of this you're not going to see through the API, but you might be displaying this to your customers, right, through the API. So it's kind of a good thing to understand.
Mhm.
This is the stuff that they're going to go through that they're going to start cross-referencing in that manual vetting process. And one of the newer things that the registries had, and you might have seen this, is that call to action. How is that customer opting in to receive the message? Is it through a website, right? Did they sign up at a kiosk somewhere to do this? Was it on a recorded phone call? How are they doing the opt-in process? So that's a required field now to move forward. Sometimes people get confused about the lower opt-in keyword that's there. That's in the scenario you've seen the signs. Hey, text 2322 to this number to get more information, right? That's actually going to ask you what keywords people are sending in to do the opt-in. And then the message that is underneath that is what you're going to send back. And it's going to be, are you including the company name, the opt-out, right? The help? Are you, providing all the information that we need? So this is the stuff that they're going to look at and make sure it matches.
It's also pretty important to note on all of the carrier requests or inquiries that we've gotten on verified traffic. Every one of them asks for proof of opt-in and the opt-in flow for the mobile subscriber,
right,
and proof of opt-in, so screenshots. So if you're saying, hey, the customer received an email, or they went through a Facebook advertisement, they want to have all of that detail on it. It's really important to make sure. I think you guys are pretty solid on that, is to have that verifiable opt-in data available for any subscriber that you're messaging.
So we actually had a few clients that said that they have opt-in through direct verbal responses. If there's a way that we could prove that, would that be allowed, or pretty much no, because it needs to be a screenshot or something along those lines?
Well, I mean, this is where it comes into implied consent or express written consent. I think if it's like an outbound, a promotional type of text message, then it needs to be express written. If it's the customer called in and they're talking to an agent in the contact center, and the agent asks, hey, would you like to continue this via text, or would you like to receive text, whatever? And the person's like, yeah, do I have your approval? And they give a yes, right? That would be more of the implied. I guess that falls under more of the implied consent. So, but you would just have to outline that.
And what we're seeing a lot in that situation is the first message going out from a contact center is a double opt-in.
Double opt-in.
Okay.
Yeah, like that's what's happening quite a bit, right? Like, hey, do you mind if we give you a call? I mean, if we gave you a text message, that's great. Okay, you're going to get a text message. Just respond yes with that, letting us know that it's okay, right?
Got it. Okay.
And so that's what we see a lot of in that use case, is that double opt-in part.
All right. And that'll be sufficient enough as the proof of opt-in?
Yeah, because you're sending
guess-
literally that message saying, hey, are you, and
Okay.
that's where you can even put that opt-in language right here in that opt-in field. Opt-in keyword is yes, and you are sending that opt-in message. Hey, this is company X. You're getting this message because you've agreed to receive text messages from us, right? Please respond to yes. And now you have a history of that, right?
Got it. Okay.
You have that double opt-in stuff that lives in there.
Okay.
But again, now you have to complete. It has to contain the opt-out. It has to contain the help, right? If they respond help, are you going to shoot them a website that they have to go to that explains maybe how they opted in, or a reminder of how they opted in, or what they need to do to opt out, right? These are things that have to be in the message now, right? You have to provide a way for them to opt out and get help, at least on those initial messages, right?
Okay.
So we can go to the next slide. So this is a place where we see people get in trouble in a lot of rejected campaigns. So someone might go in and say, hey, I hit yes on the term embedded link, and then they put in a sample message up here, and in the sample message it contained a no embedded link. Or they say it had an embedded phone number, and then the message didn't have an embedded phone number. And then they say, okay, it's rejected. The sample didn't meet the criteria and for the attributes that were selected. Right. So this is the kind of detail they're getting into. And we're seeing a lot of these little mismatch things that people are putting in, or they'll say, hey, the message content, you provided a URL and we're looking at the message content and you're saying, hey, it's for the product X, Y, and Z. And I go to that website and that sample message doesn't jive well with what's on the website, right? Then they're going to block that and say, well, there's the example doesn't meet the website, or there was a URL provided and there was a redirect. Okay, well, we're not gonna move forward with that.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, I would say, interesting ways I've seen people build campaigns, to try to make them as as broad as they can. Like they'll say, okay, hello, in parentheses, a name, right? And so they try to put the things that are variables inside of a message, they try to kind of outline those in their sample messages to try to be able to have a little more, like you have to think about an appointment reminder, right? The time's going to change, the address might have changed, there's things like that might change within a message where, you need to put that in there and they understand that if you're putting kind of that placeholder. But like Scott said earlier, you're not actually changing like a website that they're going to, a name might change, an address might change, a date might change, right? In the event of like an appointment reminder.
Yeah, here's a little side note on that too, on the URLs, right? So we're seeing a lot of pushback and or rejections regarding, the quality of the URL. So obviously, over the last several years, everybody liked to use shortened URLs, right, with tracking IDs on them. The perception is if you register under a brand, that brand needs to be clearly identified in the text message. So if say you're Tony's Pizza and you want to send out a notice to your customer base, the header on the text message would say, bracket Tony's Pizza bracket, hey, on this Friday, half off chicken, whatever. And then the domain would be like Tony's Pizza / if you want to have a tracking ID. What they're trying to filter out, and what will also, if it gets through the registry process, it'll usually get caught up in the spam filters is, HTTP / colon 53256J4/32 whatever, right? The URL shorteners.
Oh yeah.
If that's the URL shortener you're using in your sample message, the human beings are going to look at that and say that's no shoe, and they'll reject it, right? So ideally, you want to make sure you have verifiable domains, and that gets kind of tough if you're doing large, marketing campaigns, right? If you have tracking IDs, that's why they don't really want that affiliate traffic. So if your customer is posting their content, they want to really make sure that they're doing it with their domain, their brand, not a shortened version of their brand and so forth.
Yeah.
Other thing that we saw, yeah, Brian.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, they like things to be clear and conspicuous, right? They like things to be, right there, and they don't like things hidden, right? They don't like things that look like they're being masked a little bit.
Yep.
So, if it ever deviates from this idea of what this brand really is, that's where they usually see the problem.
Yeah, I think Brian mentioned, when you're having, you want to reference a callback number, a call to action. So, hey, call 855, whatever that may be. We've seen message traffic that was actually going out, and people and it actually got rejected because the person vetting the campaign, it was an invalid number. Like, well, this number's not valid. I'm like, well, I looked at the number, and the brand who was basically loading the content, left off one of the digits. So it was a 6-digit phone or a 9-digit phone number, right? They left it. That's the part. Whoever's writing the content, they need to double check everything. Make sure that if they're using a phone number, it's a solid 10-digit phone number. If it's a US numbering plan number, make sure that they call it, and make sure that that number doesn't get to, there's no errors. It's not like, hey, this number's been disconnected. If you're sending as Tony's Pizza and someone calls that 800 number, either someone answers as Tony Pizza, or the voicemail / answering machine answers as Tony Pizza, right? They're checking that. And so if you say you're Tony's Pizza here's an 800 number to call to place an order, and they call that number and it's, Brian Ford's, real estate, they're going to reject it. So that's the thing, right? Is that really making sure that everything is aligned and solid.
Yeah, that's true. So, yeah. So once you've gone through and you've gone through the creation process of everything, this is going to be your final page where it gives you a summary of everything you've done to build the campaign. And I think they're on, but Sam and Ashley and their team have they've just built this whole new system. So a big shout out for them to kind of give you you put your eyes on what you're creating here. So this is going to make sure you have a clear understanding of what you're doing right here, right at the end, what carriers they're going out to. So if you want to review, oh yeah, I did the opt-in, I have the embedded link, I have the embedded phone number, right? Does this all match what I just wanted to build? Okay. And again, like I said, you're using the API, but this is stuff that your customers might, need to be aware of through the process to help make sure they're getting their stuff approved. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, you can go back to that. This is just kind of reiterating some of the stuff we've gone through. The brand, whoever your opt-in is, like, it's never you, right? It's never you as the agency. And so you look at that bottom line, we're kind of the provider, you might be the agency, and your customer is going to be that brand. Like understanding like that we as the provider are just passing the message through for you as the agency, for ultimately that goes for that brand that's at the end. So we can go to the next one here. Yeah. We talked a lot about this here. This is talking again about the URLs, not having the redirects, not having another one are obscure top level domains, right? Sometimes those ones get flagged too as kind of maybe not as trustworthy. So your more consistent, TLDs, your top level domains are going to be better for some of these. So for your messaging, right? So. So yeah, I guess me and Scott, we can kind of get into the rhythm of a lot of what we're talking about when we're going through these slides, but these are just reiterating kind of what we've already talked to. Like he said, they can call the phone numbers when they're doing that manual review process. So that's just something that we're going to just beat over everyone's head, like make sure that this stuff all falls in line. That brand is consistent through the whole process, that URL, that phone number, everything that, that's there. So you can go to the next one there. This is a big one. Obviously, everyone that's working in messaging needs to be aware of the stuff that's, outlawed, like we said at the very beginning, being aware of the CTIA guidelines, codes of conducts. And, you've probably heard the term shaft, sex, hate, alcohol, firearms, and tobacco. This is stuff that just gets filtered out. We don't even allow it on our network if it contains a lot of some of the stuff involved with some of this. So
that also includes like under tobacco, CBD.
Right, CBD is a big one, yeah. And even though states have different rulings, there's federal laws against it, and so FCC that kind of manages a lot of this. They have a say in it, and also again those code of conducts that belong to each one of those networks. At the end of the day, it's their network. They're protecting their consumer, and they have a right to kind of place those rules on their networks. So those are the big ones here. This is another one. I mean, we tend to see this, that top line, that tone and emotions are easily misconstrued. We see that more during the political seasons in the messaging space, right? You'll see people, can you believe this? Or it almost sounds threatening, but you want to watch that tone because people are going to receive it that way. And one of the biggest complaints you can receive in the messaging space is the 7726 complaint. That's when a consumer copy and paste the message that they get, send it to 7726, which means spam. And then the carrier says, okay, what number sent this to you? Right. Then you provide them with the number and they say, thanks. And it gets reported. And that's the most egregious thing that you can get as far as a reporting. It's because it's directly from the consumer.
Yeah, just to add a little note on that. So, knowing what the carriers really, like Ryan said, that they're very, very sensitive to that. So, you know, we're at this part in the game based on everything we've seen, and we know, I think that's the kind of thing that, you know, the value that we're providing to you is we know what the carriers like, and we know what the carriers don't like, and we know what they really get upset about. And we're at this point in the game where, you know, the slide 1 or 2 slides ago was talking about tone. You know, really at this point in the game, the mobile subscriber holds your destiny, right? And so you always have to make sure that whatever your customer's sending out to their opted-in customers, like, it needs to be conversational, it needs to be informative, it needs to be valuable to that mobile subscriber, because at any point in the game, that mobile subscriber can just basically, they can flag it as spam, they can mark it as junk, you know, simply they may just opt out. But, you know, the carriers track opt out. I don't know if you guys are aware, but I mean, under T-Mobile's acceptable use, T-Mobile expects the opt out rate to be no higher than 0.5, wait, point, was that 0.05?
0.05% or something like that, half
One
percent.
half of 1%.
Yeah.
So if you send out a million messages, what is that? You know, can't do the math. 10,000, no more than like 10,000 stops. So they're tracking that. 7726 actually inflates pretty bad. I don't know what the percentage is on that one, but if you get, I mean, I've seen complaints on 1 or 2 messages.
Right.
So this is what's important to make sure that the content, right, and you know, whoever's writing it, they need to use spell check or grammar check, you know, because if you get a text message and there's a lot of misplaced grammar, that you're like, the words are misspelled, your perception is that this is phishing, this is spam or fraud, right, from somebody overseas, because most people, you know, we assume that a lot of that fraud comes from overseas, you know, agents. And so that's the first perception. Oh, this looks like phishing or fraud. I'm definitely going to forward that to Verizon and let them know that these guys are, you know, this looks really suspicious. So content, you know, how it reads, is it conversational? Is the grammar correct? Are the domains correct? Is the stop? It has to be on every, you know, at least on all the initial messages. Is it there, and is it working? So if they don't like your message and they reply with stop, right? Hopefully that's the end of it, because you get the stop and then you respond back to them, hey, you know, sorry to see you go, but we've immediately removed you from our list. You won't be contacted again, or whatever that opt out response is. And a mobile subscriber, that's like me. If I reply to stop and I get them, okay, I took care of it, it's fine. I'm not going to get any more from this person, and I'll let it go. But if the stop isn't working, and that's why you need to check them on a regular basis to make sure that component's there. If I keep getting messages from that person after I've said stop, now I'm a little more inclined to contact my carrier about it and have them investigate it, or, you know, stop it. So.
Yeah, and like Scott even said, it can happen at any time. And we've seen reports come in, and we'll do a lookup on the message, and it was 4 months ago, and that was someone that just they just learned that they can report this stuff, and they started going through their messages and reporting every message they didn't like. So that tone kind of matters if someone's going back through that saying, I'm mad about this one for some reason today, or I just learned about this neat trick that I learned on TikTok, right?
Content, you know, don't let your content creators be sloppy, like that stuff. And someone, you know, depending on how, I'm sure, you know, your customers, hopefully they have a marketing team that double checks and they proof stuff before it goes out en masse to a mobile subscriber base. Yeah. Because the ultimate goal, obviously, too, is to get conversion, right? You want people to actually call that number. Do you want them to go to that URL or respond to your survey? Right? That's valuable, and that's, you know, if any of that stuff's missing, you're losing money. Not only that, you're putting yourself at risk.
Just more information on providing the opt-out, right? Something that needs to be put in there, at least in some of those initial messages. So again, just reiterating some of that here. Know your privacy policy. And this is kind of interesting stuff. The stuff they're really looking in the privacy policy is they're looking to see if you're sharing this stuff. Is it third party? Is it affiliate? What's happening to the data that's coming in, right? Like, is it being shared? And, you know, you're not collecting it on behalf of, you know, and selling it to a lot of people, right? You're not representing 3 different, insurance companies, and we've had kind of extensive calls with the DCAs and stuff on how some of this works. And what we're kind of steering toward, and Scott, you can kind of correct me if I'm wrong or support this idea from some of our conversations, but when you're building these, these privacy policies and these terms of services, you're almost making ones that are separate and mobile specific that only pertain to the mobile portion of what's being driven on your website, right?
Yeah, if messaging is a heavy part of your business, or you're doing contact center, but I would, we're seeing a lot more people put in a mobile terms and conditions. I don't know if you guys have that, which really kind of spends a lot of emphasis about, that you don't share their party with other affiliates or other partners without their consent. It has the TCPA components about how many messages they're going to receive per month, and kind of covers a lot of that stuff. And one of the ones that we got, it was interesting. It was someone who was basically running traffic on a short code. Their mobile terms and conditions says you're going to receive a text message from a 5-digit number, but then they were actually trying to run 10 DLC traffic. So anyways, Verizon's like, well, their mobile terms and conditions says it doesn't state anywhere that they're going to get a text message from a local number. And they caught that. I was shocked. So they had to go back in and say, you may receive messages from this short code number and a toll-free number and a 10-digit local number.
Yeah.
So it's important. I mean, it's always good. And we've done a lot of those. We've helped a lot of customers with compiling those. And if that's something you guys haven't done or you want to do, we can follow up and provide a little bit of color on how to do that.
We like to apply a little pressure when we see things like the mobile operators trying to dictate the other elements of people's businesses through websites and stuff. And that's why, there's, websites can contain a lot of avenues that are more than just mobile, right? Or, but that's just, something that we're like, I like to bring up is that we're kind of seeing that mobile specific language going in. So. Stuff we just kind of went through on this, right? What's in your terms and conditions, what services you're providing, how you're enrolling and everything. Like Scott said, how many times am I going to get notified? All that kind of good stuff. You want to make sure that's inside the terms and services, that's being reviewed by the DCAs manually. You can go for it ahead there, Tim. Obviously, this is basic stuff. Send only to your opt-in, right? Spam is not good for anyone. It's what's getting in trouble and flagged, and it's kind of what's helped create the system we're in today. And so the more we kind of just are vigilant in taking on that good traffic, the better off we're going to be. The longer you're going to be able to run the campaigns and run everything, hopefully there's not too many more changes that come through. It just seems like they keep making more rules that we have to comply with because everyone's trying to skirt the rules. And I think if we all just trying to be our best actors, right? We try to be good actors in here.
Did you guys see that notice we just went out right before the first? That T-Mobile, basically, if you have a campaign that's not active, doesn't have any numbers signed to it, that they're ghost campaigns, that they actually were going to charge $250 per each campaign. That's like, this is crazy.
Yeah, we don't know if it's a money grab or if it's just they're just seeing, and I can kind of understand their situation. Someone's going and creating a campaign or multiple campaigns that are just sitting there and not being in use, and at any given moment, right, they can just start sending traffic on these campaigns and then kind of almost snowshoe the campaign, right?
Yeah, that's important. We covered that early on, but maybe make a note on that one, that when you do create a campaign, assign at least one number to it.
Right.
Because Ryan, is it more than 60 days if it sits like that without any activity or any?
It's a rolling 60 days. So if it's rolling
60
60 days, there is, you get the charge of $250.
We had one customer who had a bunch of those just sitting dormant, and I think it was like almost $13,000 worth of T-Mobile fees that they were going to be facing if they didn't either get rid of them or assign numbers to them.
Correct. Yeah, so we talked about this, make sure that sample message matches the brand and the campaigns, right? So again, more language just on making sure everything matches in that campaign creation process, because it's not done by the campaign registry, it's done by the aggregator. The aggregator is going to scrutinize everything because ultimately they're the ones that have to answer for what leaves their network to the mobile operators. And when the mobile operators go yelling at them, they come yelling at us. And then, you figure it out from there. So, yeah, hopefully that gives a good overview of kind of the do's and don'ts and the things that we're seeing, and maybe the things that you can tweak on your side to get some of those campaigns approved, more often. Obviously that's our goal with these trainings, right, is to make sure that the success rate goes up, because our success is your success, and that's what we're looking to get done. So hopefully.
Can I ask, are there any common problems from the Ricochet side that you're seeing that aren't addressed here, that we should be thinking about at our end, that we can help you with respect to launching your campaigns?
I mean, I think this was just fantastic, because everyone that's in the meeting here is on different levels of understanding of the implementation and registration process. So I can't say thank you enough for this, especially for the sales team and the customer service, for all of us to see it. I feel like our current strategy is the same. I think from what I see, we have those things in place, but understanding it so that we can better educate our customer, this has been invaluable. I can't think of any input to put in just yet. I mean, as you could see, it's a lot to digest, a lot of regulation, a lot of and of course, and a lot of shifting things too. Like, seems like week to week, nothing surprises us anymore, right? In the last 3 months, you see like this, and now they're this, and now we're this, but overall, the theme being, compliance, so I appreciate the input, and I'm going to be quiet here. If anybody else has any input, I can't think of anything yet, but I really appreciate this.
I'll jump in and just say I can kind of commend you for having all those different layers of people throughout your organization attend this, because not everyone always pulls in, all the different ranks to come in and learn this stuff. And it really is important for everyone to get that understanding on. And so thank you for having, all the people from the different areas of your company come in and listen to this. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Yep, guys, I have 2 questions.
Sure.
It's Michael Charles. I'm in the sales team. So when you say quality URLs, right? Could you elaborate a little bit more about that? And do you guys have any examples of of any a URL what's not considered quality?
I mean, I can take that, Brian. Yeah, so the URLs, it's just, when you're out there selling to a potential new customer,
Yeah.
You want to make sure, and this is another big thing, and this also aligns to the voice side of the world, right? You're all familiar with the FCC, know your customer. But I think this starts on the sales side. And so when you're prospecting or you get someone on the phone, it's important to really understand what is their use case. What type of business are they in? What type of message traffic are they sending? What kind of phone calls are they going to be making? And really, and this is just like a general thing, but, really make sure that brand or that customer is vetted. And then, the quality URL is going to be, let's say it's, XYZ Towing, that's your customer. And so when they're sending out message traffic, right, it's that they're using xyztowing.com as their brand, not like, 53 or XYZ Towing and the O is a 0, right? That's, if you look back what the affiliate marketing space was doing over the last several years, it's basically using, especially if you're doing stuff that's non-compliant, like it's on the shaft lift. So they would basically use digits, numbers to represent letters in a URL. So it's, XYZ Towing, but the O is a 0, and then the W, and then the I is a 1.com/533, whatever, right? So that's what we're talking about, using legitimate verified domains, is real domains that don't have numbers representing letters. You're not using shorteners like 5342/32 whatever, .io. Making sure that if one of the other things too that we've had called out by the carriers is that, if someone goes to that site, let's say you do have a legitimate landing page and that landing page has an expired certificate. So whoever lands there's like, hey, this is a fraud risk. This is, go back to safety. You know what I'm talking about? It's like the 3 hours on a website, like making sure that those things are in place, because the perception from the subscriber is, wow, this link is fraud. This is phishing, or there's something bad. And then they'll report it. In too many of those, now you're in an RCA process with the carrier. So hopefully I answered that.
No, yes, you did. And the second question I have, you guys mentioned the 7726 gets reported. Say if that happened, for whatever reason, a customer client number gets reported, do they even verify with the person who who number got reported as spam or et cetera? I mean, how does that work?
No. And so that's typically when we have to go back and do like what's called an RCA or root cause analysis. And that's why when we talk to people about opt-in is such an important thing, because that's really our only evidence, right? To go back to a complaint and say, hey, now they're asking for the opt-in process. So in a situation like that, hey, I got the 7726. Okay, you said this is how the customer opts in. If that's how they're doing it, okay, please provide us with the opt-ins from that user, right? Hey, so we have that information to actually go back and say, hey, this customer actually logged in, huh?
Yeah, they rarely provide the subscriber, right? And Brian said earlier, I mean, it could be like we've had carriers like, we need the opt-in process for this message traffic. And like, well, we've actually had it. Well, that message traffic has never been on our network, nor the phone numbers that were used in that campaign were never on our network. And this is from September and this is January. Like the carriers, like they can really cause a lot of problems. And so, they're just like somebody on their fraud team got this on their desk because someone to say more than 4% of your traffic was flagged under 7726. They hit someone's desk, they looked at it, took a glance, and then they're just like, send it out to the DCA. I want all this information now.
Okay. And once they're reported, I mean, that goes for all carriers, because and I'm curious, on top of the industry, what I'm in right now, prior to this, I was in the gold industry, and these guys, they send messages. I mean, I'm not even sure if they're compliant or not, but with that being said, if one carrier reports them, does that, go across the board for like, T-Mobile, Sprint, all of the carriers across the board, just that one company, one carrier?
You can, and we've had this happen. I'm sure it's happened, and maybe Brian can recall. Most of the time it's going to be T-Mobile, right now. They're probably, the most heavy-handed with any of this, and then Verizon, and then AT&T. AT&T RCAs are pretty rare. I don't think I've ever seen it so bad where you literally got an RCA from all three carriers at the same time.
Yeah. We typically don't see that. It's usually isolated to a carrier, and we've even seen it to where we get an RCA, from upstream for T-Mobile, but then we might get it and say, well, now Verizon wants one. Like, right. So, but they're not at the same time.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, typically it's not across the board for all the carriers.
Okay. All right. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Sure. I think if there's no questions on
Scott, real quick.
Oh yeah.
Hey, this is Mike Tyndall here. Hey, I just put my customer hat on for a second because I get this question a lot. I thought it might be useful to the group, but like, say for example, you got a customer, you get back to the quality URL piece. I got a customer, they're trying to stay under the 160 character text limit, but my URL is lumberliquidators.com. It's long, right? And I want to shorten it so I can have more of the message be the content, not my air quote, quality URL.
Mm-hmm.
What are the sort of, I guess, rules for something like that? If I wanted to use Bitly, or are they basically going to say, well, you need to go buy, go spend $100,000 and buy ll.com, right? Or something like that.
That's a great question. So I think the big thing is people who are the copywriters, have them get creative, right? And if it goes over, what you don't want is the actual URL to be concatenated midstream message, and then it kicks over a second message. So you can put that domain up front, so you know that it's always going to be there, to make sure that always gets on the first message. Adjust the message content. I think a lot of times you'd realize, like, we've all been there writing, trying to get 700 words compressed into 500 words for an essay. You can get creative, use different words, get at the source. If that's not possible, then yes, I would say, then the other option is to go out and register, like, lumberliquidators.com, SMS, something that still looks and appears that it can be tied to that brand without, because the bit.ly URLs, it's like I said, it's a combination uppercase, lowercase letters and numbers, right? Even special characters. Try to avoid the special characters in your domain.
And I believe they actually reject any bit.ly redirects.
Yeah.
They'll right now they would just go in and just not approve the campaign. It would get rejected on any short.
And the same thing's true if people tried to get funny with character sets and say, okay, well, I'm just going to trim the tail off all of the A's in the alphabet, right? To make it to the human eye look like an A, but to the spam filter, it's not an A, right?
Yeah. And that's just creating problems for our support team, right? And everybody else. Yeah, we go through that with some other customers.
I've seen a lot of stuff.
Yeah, and it's that, what do we used to call that? Leet speak, right?
Yeah.
It was that old leet speak stuff. So.
Hey, I want to be sensitive to time here, and I think we've only got about 4 minutes left on this webinar. And from our end, we have operations, sales, marketing, product, engineering, architecture. I would love it if you have any feedback for us, so that we're having a direct communication straight into our engineering group. Mike, Sam, Brian's in product, Tim's in marketing. Any feedback for us relative to product direction, where you see the market going, that could be helpful to us, helpful to you.
We'll leave that to the CSM team, I think. Anybody? Jonathan, Patrick?
Yeah, like I don't this time. Like I said, pretty much right now the form from what you presented looks very similar to also what we're doing now as far as through API and forms and the information. So I don't really, as of yet, have any I don't have any input or I'm sure as we continue to go through the process, as we run into things, Christy's still with us, right? I think Christy does.
Yeah, I'm here.
I think maybe you might have, I don't know if you have any, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just know that a lot of times Christy does a lot of follow-up when we have rejected issues. And so I was thinking maybe through that process, do you have anything that you run into a regular basis, maybe that you would, boy, it'd be so great if we had this feature, or this would make it easier for those. Maybe that's the only thing I could think of.
I think providing more clear guidelines for people to follow would be helpful when creating their campaigns. I think that some people get a little lost when it comes to that. This checklist that we're looking at is actually really awesome.
Yeah.
I think that will help a lot. But in all honesty, I think a lot of the time things are getting rejected just because the user is not providing the information accurately. Like they're not giving us the correct URL for their website, or they have a different EIN and they entered an old one or something like that. That's what a lot of the rejections are. It's just people not giving accurate information.
Well, luckily there's no $15 cost on the brand. If it get, to get that vetted, that's just a $4 cost to register the brand. So if it's a bad EIN, at least there's not a lot of recourse. There is some teeth in the manual vetting process now, where it's, a $15 charge per vet. So if they get a campaign rejected and they have to go through it 3 times, they're going to get charged $45, right? So maybe explaining that to them, like, hey, be aware of what you're doing through this process, like a little time now can save you a lot of money in the long run, right?
Yeah.
And kind of let them know, like, yeah, there is teeth in this, and that's a pass-through fee. Like, we don't make a dime of that, right? We just pass that along from what we're charged. And so all these things are out there now that if maybe if we make them aware of some of these pressure points that exist now, they might be a little bit more mindful and careful as they're going through the process. And they might understand it's a little bit more delicate than just throwing a bunch of mud at the wall and seeing what sticks. So I
Yeah.
think that's something I'd reiterate with the customers, to say, look, it's a little bit more delicate than maybe it used to be. There used to not be manual vetting. There used to not be registration at all. It's evolved into what it is today, and these mistakes can end up costing you a lot of money in the long run. And those aren't dollars that we can just credit out either, because they're pass-throughs, right? So.
Yeah, and I think, Brian, it behooves us just to remind ourselves that the other really big piece of feedback is people really thought about the registration process as something to do early in the process, well, maybe even while they were still noodling on what the message was going to be. It's like they need to get their paperwork in order, dot the I's, cross the T's, have the actual messages ready to go before they register. And then if it gets approved, they're going to be fine, right? So the problem is, they put the cart before the horse and they don't have everything finalized before they start.
Okay.
So that's the biggest feedback to the customers, for sure.
That makes sense.
Yeah, by the way, I'm happy to provide not only this deck, we have another deck that has some more information in it and the checklist. I'll send that to all you guys as soon as we get off, along with this recording. So you'll have access to all that content. And even if you want us to repurpose this potentially to use externally, I'm happy to work with our designers. We can do that for you as well. So let me know what would be most helpful.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Actually,
You guys are great. Thank you.
a real life example would be perfect too, that you would consider a perfect text message. That would be
Oh,
allowed.
sure. Actually, we
I think
did a
that'd be
whole,
awesome.
yeah, we actually did a whole webinar with really interesting examples of all the political text messages that were sort of good, bad, and different. Yeah, we've got a library of those. We'll dig some out for you.
Awesome. Thank you.
We'll work on that as well. Sure. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Tim, Michael, good seeing you again. Scott, thank you so much.
Yeah, likewise.
Brian, great
That's good
job.
seeing you guys again.
Thank you.
Good,
Yeah.
Thank
good
you.
seeing everybody.
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for
Thanks,
bringing
Kevin.
everyone. Yeah.
Yeah, that was super helpful, guys. I really appreciate it.
All right.
Got it.
We appreciate it as well. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Have a great
Appreciate it.
weekend.
Bye-bye.
You guys.
Okay,
Thank you.
Bye.
bye-bye.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.